strategy, and you are able to read about human capital and potential. Next, balance between the social aspects and industrial aspects. Some colleagues were for developing only one part of the platform. We didn't understand that we had to cover several aspects. We do not have too much resources, but education, social aspects, there are 17 targets actually, and we started immediately thinking about compensating. Excuse me, Anatoly, please, I was involved in strategy and planning. My idea, that's why, is as follows. There are many correct things here, but they're universal. Could you please dwell on what is specific for St. Petersburg? And I would like to say that if we think about strategies and about our experience, I faced a number of doubts and had mistakes carried out and errors, and quite often we decided that everyone has to deserve what he or she deserves, so to say. As we say in the Russian language, each sister has to have her pair of earrings, it's our saying, and we used to say we shouldn't forget this, we shouldn't forget that, and we were overloading our airplanes, so to say, and our ships, and were not able quite often to move. We have covered a number of milestones, but what is specificity? You're quite right, it's a very painful process to select the target, so we selected several targets. That's what I was trying to describe. We do understand that there should be human capital in the heart of it, the quality of environment, city environment, the quality of management, quality of interface and interactions with the society, and economic growth, which is decisive, and this is our choice. It was a very important aspect for us. Maybe about another thing which is quite important and which is about our topic today. It's changing of the system for planning of the city development. Similar to Moscow, we follow the following principle, the principle of monocentric orientation. The biggest number of working stations, so to say, are concentrated in the downtown, and social facilities, public facilities are there as well. We are starting shifting to the polis-centric principle. And speaking about the strategy, we right there about the potential to select territories according to the qualities, social, economic, public, other qualities that the territories, such territories could meet. There are 80 indices, indications that should be considered when selecting such territory. We know, we do understand the polis-centric model is objective necessity. It's connected with many factors. We should remember about movements of labor forces, the aspect of residency should be remembered. We should understand that if I live in this particular district, I should enjoy the same set of their quality indices that are decisive for the quality of my life. And speaking about jobs, employment, job station, there should not be necessary to cross the city to go to work. If you want to cross the city, you are welcome, but we are obliged to develop the environment that would allow people to enjoy all possible potentials in their districts. Then there are other areas that are very important today as well. A territory of our historical center, our downtown, it's very important, and nearby territories, as we call it, the grey industrial belt, that is underused today. It's great territories that should be developed and used. When we speak about historical historical center. And such territories, those territories are associated with limitations for construction and other type of work. It has been mentioned that one of the problems is as follows. The standards, regulatory norms, they have changed, but we can't apply them in the downtown and the historical center. We should keep saying that regulatory construction norms for the central part, they should be specific. Other regions should be controlled by other maybe norms and regulations. And second thing, speaking about the center, we tend to create, if we speak about quality of life, we have to create the public spaces. Our strategies used to be developed around the idea of creating maybe pedestrian zones, and we used to do it, and this part will be used in the new strategy as well. Maybe we are moving slowly, but we have this vision, this objective now to move towards creation of public spaces. It was very important to define how we go into three territories. There are different territories for complex, for integrated construction. There are industrial territories, other territories, residential problems. This problem is in the area of status, their status. We should understand for them to be able to be developed. We should understand what kind of a territory we are dealing with. What is this territory about? So territorial approach, understanding of the status of this kind of territorial agglomeration. This is important, and we should keep implementing new approaches. But when doing this, we should remember that we have no right to infringe the rights of those who live there. We know that each project could infringe the balance very easily. So we will speak the above-mentioned aspects, and if we remember our topic, so I would like to say that what I have been dwelling about was and is very important for us. Allow me a complicated, tricky question maybe. You start dwelling on polycentric approach, so it could be awaited. We could maybe start thinking about it many years ago, where complicated case, lots of water, rivers, canals, landscape is very complicated, but you started mentioning it. But does it mean that resources will be relocated from the center for creation of new attraction points for attraction, because we'll start developing this polycentric mode? Speaking about resources, budget, investments, what could be said? That's what we're thinking about. We have no other choice, you know.
Не реализовывать этот дискомфорт, это значит усугублять ту ситуацию, которая есть.
We can't continue aggravating the existing situations in the center. We have 1 million of job stations. All in all, we have 2.5 job places, job stations. It means that people very early in the morning start moving towards the downtown. You understand what is happening in the underground with transportation. We do develop our underground, but we could estimate now that we will not be able to provide comfortable conditions for transportation forever, things that we can't implement through budget money. We, in particular areas, tend to invite, attract business. That's why we are developing additional economic impetus, leverages, so on to attract business. Yes, we are lacking money, and I mentioned this, we have 6 billion rubles per year for the development we are discussing, but we need more to resolve our tasks. In Moscow, in conditional downtown, they have 10% of people of their population, only 10% live there, and the majority of job stations are there as well. What does the business think about it? You say you need money, but business needs the investments to be returned to. What do you think about it? My colleagues are here, colleagues with whom we have very good collaboration. I know many projects, start development, others, institutions are participating, and speaking about the strategy, it was our business circles that stated that for the first time we are developing the strategy. It's great. Maybe it's not perfect, but it exists, this new strategy, and it's quite realistic. Speaking about the Bank of Moscow, we discussed it there. You might have heard about Value project that they are developing. It was our idea initially for creation of the public spaces that will be developing. We speak about 16 circuits in the city that will be launched for bicycles, for bikes. And thank you very much. I would like to invite Michael Kuzovlev to take the floor, President and Head of the Board of the Bank of Moscow. They are our very good partners, our strategic partners. Michael, you come here to earn money. The majority of people from all over the world come here to enjoy, but you come here to earn money. What do you think about competitive advantages here? You being a representative of a bank, it's a representative institution, it is. What is attractive apart from the dimensions of the city? What kind of specificities, specialities could you see here? What would you recommend to develop to our city government so that the bank community could be attracted and could be more positive maybe about the northern capital? Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here, to be next to Madam Saskia. I know her efforts and her books and just what she was writing about the cities in the global world. And can't say that we have today strictly scientific conference, but answering. Actually, the majority of people were expecting not a scientific discussion, but they probably want to hear answers to very burning questions that are decisive for the quality of life and for the development of business. Well, business is always interested in a good partner. And speaking about our relations, and speaking about partnership with the city, with agglomeration, with metropolis, and I would like to say that for us, we have very good dialogue with the government of the city, and we could develop it along two types of lines. Business has always demanded to be socially responsible, and the business tries to invest so that it would be beneficial. On the other side, we should understand whom to speak to, how to speak, and what results could be expected, and who is responsible. And in our experience, I could say that the tasks that were spelled out, they are being carried out through the budget money and through the money of entrepreneurs that are carrying out, implement kind of order, but they invest money. But we would like that the contractors could create the right infrastructure and quality. Those who get this order for carrying out particular jobs, that everything we expect that everything is planned correctly. We do have sometimes disproportions since the Soviet time. Some things were unbalanced in 1990. This disproportion when 1 million lives in the center and 10 million are coming here in the morning, and the infrastructure is suffocating. We should think about how to meet this challenge. On the other hand, I must say that on the other hand, we could be trendsetters. I'm not talking about the hunting dogs. When it's possible to create a trend of development through investing not that much of effort, in particular area in urbanistics, we were very smart starting thinking about leasing of bicycles. In Russian it's Vela leasing, and strategy could be developed, special territories are to be prepared. There are challenges. We could start launching it immediately, starting providing equipment in the distant districts, for example. But we started thinking that if people are able to use a bike in the downtown, maybe they'll start treating it as a means of transportation, not just an entertainment, you know, if they start using it for traveling to job. Actually, you know, only 3 bicycles were stolen. We lost 4 of them, actually. But the first one that was lost was found, actually. So people were afraid that people would start stealing them. No, not at all. When the relations are like this, when the government is open to discussion, a great task could be resolved. Now, speaking about the order from the government, we managed to introduce here a mechanism for control over the city orders. We have Center for Financial Supervision and Control. We have even new formats for control, new formats that are important for the banks. It's Center which provides this support for those who are carrying out state procurement, state contracts. You might have heard about our ill-famous stadium.
We've managed to implement this control system in other projects as well. The departments of the city see how really the money is used. They can prove and approve one payment or other, so it is much easier for them to work. When we discuss these things during our meetings, we understand that this is a good way to work. If a similar dialogue would be mastered among developers or the companies that want to increase their production in the city, certainly the question will arise immediately. I have some slides, maybe the first, if you can show the first slide, please. I have a project here, the modernization and increase of comfort of life in the city via the resolution of the so-called grey belt problems. This is a share of territories in St. Petersburg, not that much, around 10% or 30% of the downtown are meant for redevelopment. These are the former industrial areas, and this is very important not to lose the uniqueness of St. Petersburg when doing this, because St. Petersburg is not only a cultural city, it was created, as you were absolutely right, as a window to Europe. It is a logistics hub. It was created as a war and fortress, war point and fortress. That's why St. Petersburg has a well-developed industry. There's a lot of higher education institutions here as well. So when we redevelop these territories, it would be nice not to follow the short-term interests of developers. We, as bankers, probably would prefer this because it would be easier for us if the project is shorter and no expenses incurred in terms of relocation of industrial enterprises. But for the city, certainly it is very important to preserve or maybe even multiply the taxation base or the taxpayers base, because these industrial enterprises contribute a lot into the city budget. Your bank works a lot with the different subjects of Russian Federation and big cities. Can you compare the experience of St. Pete in terms of working on industrial areas compared to similar work in other cities? And what is positive and what is negative compared with some leaders, if there are such leaders in Russia, in terms of working in former industrial areas and redeveloping them? I'm probably not well versed in these details. Maybe my colleagues who deal with redevelopment know better. But as far as I understand, St. Petersburg is in the start of this way. VTB Bank had several projects, the Town Hall or Ratusha project and the Europe Embankment project. I think this may be considered as part of the redevelopment of the downtown part of St. Petersburg. I have some experience in terms of Moscow. The projects that are going on now, to my opinion, are more prepared, but I don't want to say anything bad about Petersburg because I do not know these projects in details. We'll touch this topic because for St. Petersburg, this is a great question because it is such a big industrial center. Yes, I agree, and St. Petersburg has one other unique property. If we look at the number of at the level of occupancy in the city, then 55% are people who are working in small and medium businesses. And this SME in Moscow amount to approximately 40%. If this trend might have been multiplied and strengthened, certainly we would be able to resolve the problem that exists in the economy, because all the small and medium enterprises are non-competitive. The figures for all Russia are even worse. If we look at the statistics for all Russia, only 25% of the tax payments come from the SME into the consolidated budget, which means that their productivity is lower, and it confirms the fact that they are working in this grey belt you've mentioned. Yes, to my opinion, St. Petersburg, and when we speak about urban planning, we see that within the framework of the trend that exists in the world as of today. You mentioned about strategy, that the strategy was developed taking into account the priority of national interests. Our priority of the national interest is to be competitive. Whether we want it or not, the process in the world goes in terms of the increase of urban population, not only in mega cities. And when we look at some projects, for example, the new Moscow, if we compare it with the big Paris, from the point of view of the management, this is a very difficult project, and these issues have to be resolved by the best representatives of the industry. Whether we want it or not, St. Petersburg has a huge perspective in this area, because on the one hand it was created as a window to Europe, and it is really a logistics hub. And though it is not a capital, as we say, but it was created as a capital, and St. Petersburg is our cultural capital. Part of the administrative functions are being relocated to St. Petersburg. Some of big corporations will be relocated here. It will mean a certain load for the infrastructure. And you were absolutely right that the human role comes first. I suggest we do not go deep and deviate from the main topic. The city in which we live, all the assets of the city are good production means as well. Thank you. Thank you, Mikhail. I would like to pass the floor to Ms. Saskia Sasson. As a reminder, she is a professor of Columbian University, sociologist and economist, and without modesty, she is one of the global gurus in the sphere of urban planning.
Well, thank you very much for that very kind and a bit exaggerated introduction. I'm not a guru. And it's really a pleasure for me to be here in St. Petersburg, this extraordinary city that you have. What I want to start with is a provocation. As I go around the world, I keep hearing people, leaderships of cities say that they are concerned about competing with other cities. And what I want to give you as a proposition that is partly a provocation is that what matters today in this global economy are the specialized differences of cities. Now, second element in this picture is that there is a lot of shared elements among these cities. I argue, and this is perhaps a second slightly provocative proposition, that it's infrastructural. Infrastructure, in other words, something that is necessary but indeterminate how it gets used, right? The tracks of a train can be used to carry people, carry bombs, carry food for the poor. So the infrastructural has moved up more and more. Our state-of-the-art office buildings are partly infrastructural. They contain enormous capacities. This has then led a lot of commentators to argue that cities are becoming more and more similar. Just think global cities. There are about 100 global cities, and St. Petersburg is certainly one of them. And so out of that then comes also this argument of competition and this anxiety. No, the question becomes, what are the specialized differences of each city? Think of China. China has 4 major financial centers: Hong Kong, Shanghai, Shenzhen, and Beijing. They're totally different. You may recall that when Hong Kong was going back to the People's Republic in 1997, there was great anxiety about Hong Kong sort of losing enormous ground to Shanghai, and Shanghai, privileged by Beijing, by the Central Committee, becoming the star city. It didn't happen. And I remember I wrote an article in 1997 along these lines and saying, no, Hong Kong has an embedded history of specialized advantages. It has for a very long time been this intersection between China and the world and China. And Shanghai is a leading national financial center with foreign investors, but it's a national financial center. And I mention this because, and I don't know that for a fact, it is quite possible that in the case of your enormous country that there is some notion of St. Petersburg and Moscow competing, etc. I would say that if I were in the leadership of the city, and I'm very impressed, I must say, with the top leadership of the city being so engaged in the city, including the internal sort of features of the city. That doesn't happen everywhere in the world. But if I would be in St. Petersburg, and I would be at the university, let's say, my first empirical project would be to study, to understand, to do the research about all the specialized circuits on which St. Petersburg is located. When I go around the world and audiences ask me, are we a global city? I often answer, it's an empirical question. The research has got to be done. And one can start with firms, with museums, with civil society organizations. What are all the global circuits? And then you begin to understand the differences with the other major cities in your country and with other major cities in the world. And there are these very specialized geographies. A city like New York is on thousands of specialized circuits. So that to me is an extremely important issue. What we have seen historically in the 1980s, when this whole process of globalization begins, is that in the anxiety of losing ground in a highly competitive world, the leadership of a city like London, of a city like New York, sacrificed a lot of the important features of a city's daily life, the kinds of things that have been discussed here, in the name of global competition. Who gained from that image? The firms, the global firms, who could go to a city and say, if you want my office building here, etc., then you better give me no tax payments, give me land for low price, etc. And a city like New York sacrificed everything else for that. Now, I have also done research on what are the global circuits and the global locations of the top 100 specialized service corporations. Together, these 100 firms are located in over 600 cities. Those firms don't need one city, they need many cities. And from the perspective of a city, the leadership of a city, this means that those firms need your place as much as, a place needs some of these global firms. So I just think that I give that as a framing, because it means that these social issues that I've heard about in this presentation, questions of housing, etc., yes, they matter, and they should not be sacrificed, for a larger project. Now, when I think about the global city is an analytic construct. Not everything in a city is the global city. We call it global city because there are two levels at which this concept operates. But the specialized concept is really, and I hope that I'm not speaking too much economics. I noticed that before you said not too much economics. But the real question is the intermediate economic sectors. The global city is a specialized production place, producing intermediate functions. It is not just about headquarters. In countries where big firms have options for locating, in many countries there's only one place, but where they have options, the headquarters, take the United States, the headquarters leave New York, but they can only leave New York if there is that incredible sort of production side of specialized lawyering, specialized accounting, specialized technical advice, etc., in a city. So the question of headquarters, hanging yourself on the headquarters of firms in the long run, is not necessarily the best formula, because it is that intermediate sector. Now, another point that hangs in there is the fact that more and more non-urban economic sectors, mining, plantations, non-urban, today have a growing urban moment. And it's that moment, if those plantations, you know what I mean by plantations, right? Is that a clear term? To grow agricultural corn or whatever. If those plantations, if those mines have a global market, they will need to access, to buy the specialized servicing functions, this intermediate sector. So that the city actually becomes a place where the non-urban is also playing out. Another point that I would like to put on the table is that I see a kind of, though this is a very delicate moment maybe in the world now, but I see sort of an emergent urbanizing of certain elements of geopolitics. Now that is particularly when you have very developed private sectors, but with the deregulations that we have seen in the West and the privatizations, it means that much more is simply city to city. You don't go through national governments. This is a feature in many parts of the world. I'm not sure in your country. I am not an expert on your country at all. The final point that harkens back, that relates to what was said on this panel, is the social question in cities. If we take the older, established global cities as a sort of natural experiment that shows you what can go wrong, then New York City is exhibit number one in its brutality of social outcomes. When this new phase begins in the late 1980s, we had hundreds, we had thousands and thousands. We had about, vast numbers of homeless people. Today, in New York City, according to our censuses, over 50% of New York City residents are under poverty wage level. Part of this social question and the price that a city pays for being a really good working global city is that more and more of the desirable, somebody didn't like what I said there, of the desirable spaces of the city get to be occupied, inhabited by, a lot of international firms, a lot of international elites, etc., which can be great stuff. But the larger space of the city pays a price. Now, those early cities, London, New York, Tokyo, etc., which were at the beginning the leading global cities, and then in the 90s you have sort of the globalizing of the global economy, and you wind up with many more global cities. But those early cities, they didn't know the social price that they were paying. And then eventually they discovered. And so I think that newer cities that are really planning now, etc., they should be quite aware of that. And in a city like London, I have a little research project that I'm doing now, which is called Who Owns the City? Now, in principle, one does not own the city. The city is a collective event. But in London, and the Financial Times, which is a very good research newspaper, has shown to what extent foreign owners, foreign capital has invested. Now, you don't buy urban land. You buy directly. Mostly you don't. But you buy urban land via buying buildings, whether homes or offices or other facilities. And so in that sense, New York and London have a lot of foreign owners. All the great, what do we call them? I never go to these shops where you buy all kinds of things, very fancy, Bloomingdale's, etc. They're all foreign owned. You know that Harrods in London is foreign owned. So the global city function means that you are really globalizing everything, for good or for bad. It is absolutely a variable. I do think we have learned some hard lessons, and I must say, in some of the presentations that I've heard here, you can see that these are the right ways to go about it. You really have to work seriously about securing housing for middle-class sectors that you will need, but that are going to be the ones most threatened. And then the final sort of illustration of this is, in New York, at one point, firemen, policemen, nurses, and teachers could no longer afford to live in New York City. Now, certainly for firemen and policemen, you want them to live in the city, so automatically the city has to pay a supplement. Same thing in London, by the way. So is this good or bad, etc.? So all I'm saying is that careful thinking and learning from some of the negatives, if you want, of some of the other global cities is part of the story. I do think that having this network of 100+ global cities with enormous shadow effects, positive shadow effects often, on other cities, this sort of internationalizing of urban space, to me is very attractive. I'm Dutch, I grew up in 5 countries, in 5 languages, so I love that, but I am not a romantic about it. I just want to say that, and nobody should. Thank you.
Thank you, Saskia. Just one question. You suggested this analysis, global versus non-global or local city. How do you envisage the destiny of St. Petersburg? Is it the only way to be a global city for such a huge megapolis with more than 5 million population, or there is another reasonable and attractive destiny for such a city like St. Petersburg?
I think a city, as opposed to simply densely built up terrain, because a city is a complex but incomplete system. Whereas a lot of density today, people think density is a city. No. Most of Tianjin in China is not a city. It's endless office buildings, and homogeneous. So St. Petersburg is a city. You cannot escape your history, which also marks your future. So when I talk about the specialized differences of cities, and I have done research about this, these very specialized capacities often come partly from the deep history of a place. That is why Hong Kong could not be brought under. So I think that St. Petersburg and Moscow, the 2 major cities in this country, probably, I assume, right, that sure, you compete around certain things, for people, for glamour zones, for all of that, but there are certain sort of historically produced forms of knowledge and real specialized sort of understandings, and also your positioning in the world, as was mentioned here, close to Europe. I don't know if that was the language that was the translator said. But so you cannot escape the global city function, but what you can is learn what not to do. I don't know that everything went so well in Moscow as it developed. So you need to protect that local city as well. If you only have a global city, you have a Dubai. Do you want a Dubai? No. I mean, I don't know. So the localness, what we call the localness, also captures all those inherited capacities. Out of there comes talent, specialized ways of doing culture, etc. The localness that is part of your history is critical to have a city. Otherwise, you are a platform. So luckily, London and New York are cities that are real cities, plus this global city thing, right? So I think that today when I go to the university, I don't know where I do my university lecture, but yeah, I have to shut up, I know. But I'm going to ask if there's anybody in the audience, students, profs, who's actually doing research on what are the specialized circuits on which St. Petersburg is located, which I'm sure some are global, some are regional, some go to Europe, some go to Africa, some go to Asia, whatever, no? And that is sort of a way of capturing how your globality is constituted. And then you need, and you already know probably how your locality is constituted. But I think to have a city, you need both.
Thank you. Thank you, Saskia. I hope you'll continue tonight these topics for the bigger audience. Я прошу взять слово Антона Финогенова. Пожалуйста.
I would like to invite Anton Finogenov. Please take the floor, and maybe you'll dwell on strategies and a little bit on your vision and expectations. Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Madam Saskia. In my view, it has been a proper structure of her presentation, and she has given us an impetus for continuation. I would like to ask to show me my next slide. And the next one, Petersburg can't but be a global city. 6 million people, and we can't but improve our competitiveness. And for St. Petersburg, we are facing a new challenge. Its rates of growth. We have to develop twice as fast as the Russian Federation. Otherwise, we'll start start losing our positions. It has been mentioned that we are according to the international ratings, one among the leading 100 cities in the world. My information shows that it's not quite true. I'm sure that without improvement of the efficacy of our urban development policy, we will fail. That's why I'm going to speak about the strategy for city development. Why are we facing problems? Why the new strategy is not the only one framework for us to modernize our city development policy? First of all, the fact that we are a European city, it's a myth. We are something like Dubai from the 18th century. 10% of the territory actually is something like European landscape and environment. 90% of our city environment, it's a legacy from the Soviet times, both in the area of residential districts and in the industrial territories. It's a great challenge because our targets are associated with the creation of high-quality environment similar to what they have in Stockholm or Hamburg. Actually, we were learning from them when developing our strategy, but actually we are somewhere at the level of the suburbs, industrial suburbs of European capitals. We have zones of development that were delineated by many years ago, but we use them for 40% only. But residential construction there is quite impressive. It's again the lack of harmony. We need a density, but it should not be overwhelming. Have a look, please. It's from the 80s, 90s, 100,000 square meters, and 70%, 8% of our residential houses are like this, and the center is a historical center. When we speak about its residential capacities, we immediately start thinking about what we call the well type of yards. And let's think about beginning of the last century, 27,000 square meters. It's associated with low quality city environment. It's not associated with activity, with economical development. Excuse me for this contribution. This discussion of the density, well, it's an old kind of dispute. Many people are for density. It's not bad news. Density sometimes allows choices and options. That's the difference between metropolis, megapolis, and just a city. And one of the colleagues of Madame Saskia, Jenny Jacobs, who was kind of an icon of American urbanism, she wrote that we should not fight density. We should be able how to cook it, how to treat it. But when we're losing density, we can lose the attractiveness of the city. Exactly, we have to know how to work. That's what I have mentioned. I mentioned that overwhelming too much of it in the district of economic class. Let's say it's a problem to some extent because we do not have such demographic challenges as they have in the Eastern Asia and in China. That's why I keep saying that we should think about, we need density as density of services, but when we have high density and we are lacking infrastructure provision regarding services, when we are lacking such functions, it's a negative problem. It's bad news. news, not good news. I'm ready to continue this discussion. Would be nice to hear something from our developers and other specialists in the area. And our micro districts, it's another challenge when they continue to build, to construct without preparing transportation networks, having their hectares allocated. It's not only about transportation problem, it's decentralization of responsibility. When the population can't see their direct zones of responsibility, when there is no split between private and public spaces, as a result, we have zones that belong to nobody. Nobody is operating them. They have no functions. It's like a boom, you know, which is somewhere under the city being dug there. Then economic parameters of general layout master plan has been carried out 70%, but infrastructure has been created for something like 25%, which shows that such gaps between reality and plans are not bearable, and the current master plan can't inherit it. Another aspect of the development, our master plan shows lots and lots of industrial zones allocated for industrial and office purposes, but activity used to be concentrated within the framework of their plans for their growing and growth of such districts. The topic of golden migration, of attraction, of population, of economic globality is very popular. In the last 15 years, we failed to create a public embankment. Not a major bank was built in their downtown. No competitive public spaces. It's only pedestrian streets. You know, it's not about public space. So there are the challenges which illustrate how are we dealing with the target of improvement of attractiveness of their city environment, especially in the downtown. Speaking about green infrastructure, only one aspect, a system of parks. We can see that initially in the Soviet times, our historical genesis gave us a low level of such landscaping, and in the last years we did not have too much parks. In the last several years the situation was aggravating, and the existing parks, they failed to meet the requirements of our population regarding functions and services. Moscow is not at the sea, but they managed to achieve more impressive results regarding building such kind of embankments for pedestrians. We keep building the embankments for cars. And speaking about importance of a human being in the strategy, we should think about developing particular projects, particular what we call state orders. My impressions, emotional impression, 3 years ago, in Moscow, they launched kind of a competition, a tender regarding agglomeration, creation of new territories. There were 10 teams selected. All of them included famous architectural bureau, development bureaus, and 8 of the 10 of them, they noticed that the river could be one of the leading kind of motive for development. St. Petersburg is a sea city. We have lots of rivers and canals, but there in Moscow they realized that river is running through the city in in such a way that it could be used. They have 83 kilometers of the river. It's a great potential. They realized it, and all the participants of the competition, they stressed its importance and its role for the further development. They realized that it was a very, very special, very beneficial thing, and it is a challenge for us. You're quite right. We are not a sea city in the European understanding this. And speaking about the current situation in the transportation, our public transportation, it's a problem. Developing our metro, we will not create alternative to the cars. Even the most optimistic plans for the underground development shows that in 5-10 years, even with another 10 new stations, will not provide our population with immediate access to the metro stations, which means that they'll keep using their own private or municipal cars, whatever transportation. And speaking about our development and about Europe, what could be said about our future development requirements to the master plans? It should be very rigid, and the strategy now has been started being implemented into the practice, and general master plan will, we hope, find its place in the strategy. And the master plan should include very rigid strategic frameworks. It shouldn't be only for the private interests of particular developing companies. Is the master plan managed to carry out its function, its transparent conditions, long-term rules of the games will benefit all of us. And transportation projects, it's very important, associated with the reconstruction of the currently developing districts that are under construction, under development. I would like to stress this aspect. Without integrated solutions, we will not resolve the transportation problem. Another aspect, additional construction of road networks, of the street and road networks in the major districts that have been completed, additional systems of transportation, railway, high-speed trams, and whatever. And the task of the city is to take a decision. But what is important, it's an integrated system that will be operational, that will be multimodal, that will provide our population with high-quality alternatives to the private cars. And transportation planning, because without agglomerated transportation system will fail to resolve the task of polycentrism. We will not provide sustainable development. We will not create high-quality environment. As for the public embankments, it could be, in my view, kind of branding topic for the city. It seems to me that here we have a great potential, because the construction of embankments for people, it's not a financial challenge, it's a challenge just for administration from the government. If we plan our project for reconstruction and we don't know that the city is going to reconstruct Obvodny Channel embankment, we will continue construction of embankments along the Neva River. So the topic of publicity of functions should be in the air, on the air all the time. And reconstruction, another topic, center or suburbs or peripheral parts. When more than half part of economy is concentrated in the other part of the city in comparison to where the public population is concentrated, we should speak here about the grey belt, about reconstruction of particular territories, but we should remember about what we call Stalin on constructive type of residential spaces, and about the 60s, it's about the series of residential residential houses from the 60s.
For all these types of territories, you need specific actions, and the master plan has to take all this into account. And the thesis of reconstruction has to be present for the whole city. We have problems everywhere. We speak about new development. We have to very gradually come to the fact that we have to achieve multifunctionality, lower-rise buildings, though we understand that we are a big mega city. Taking into account the parking spaces that would be included into the cost of the flat. High requirements to the architectural quality, facade materials qualities, social infrastructure. These are the aspects that have now to be brought more practical within the master plan, and the norms have to be adapted from time to time after the new master plan has been adopted. And next topic, all successful European or North American cities are the fruit of consolidated efforts. We have never come across a situation when some big corporations or city authorities could achieve making the city comfortable for life alone. Always such success was achieved by consolidated effort, and it is very important now to allocate a certain area of responsibility to the city, but also some tools and mechanisms to a whole series of public or other organizations that are existent in the city, and we have to support these processes, reinforce them, and from my point of view, this will be the foundation for success and for St. Petersburg becoming a global city without inverted commas. Thank you, Anton. A very brief question, and please a brief answer. What do you think? Very clear rules exist in the city in terms of working with industrial areas that stimulate both the developers for taking active actions, but are not a kind of a polygons that give rise to new ghettos, whether it be an office ghetto or industrial ghetto, but are oriented onto a mixed-use concept and create quite reasonable in terms of density and functions parts of the city. It's a very problematic question, because up to now the city did not manage to develop a very clear position in terms of how it can help the developers to develop. I do not like this sentence at all, how it can help the developers. I think how it can create beneficial rules and norms in accordance with which the developers will work without harming the city. Agreed. But on the other hand, we have a lot of risks connected with this grey belt, even more serious than in Moscow, because we have a cultural and historical company and regulations that are stricter than in Moscow. There is a situation of a very high-level environmental pollution, and also there is a regulation of demand for this kind of real estate. Probably we wouldn't be able to cope without the relocation of Gazprom to St. Petersburg. So it seems to me that it is very important for the city to set up a very clear support program. Otherwise, all this grey belt area will turn into a standard residential development of a medium class, as is happening on the periphery of the Obvodny Canal, where we see 16, 17-story buildings, very standard buildings. And I think this is a very important conclusion. The city is working on this. It articulates this thesis very clearly, and the mechanisms have to be based in the town planning area. I now would like to pass the floor to Francesca Freza. Francesca, please, since we are very short of time, if at all possible, can you say a few words about this topic, center and periphery, or downtown and uptown, which is extremely important for such a historical city as St. Petersburg that is very similar to many Italian cities? And second question, which trends of modern megacities seem to you most important, most interesting, and that what could be used by St. Petersburg?
Well, thank you very much. First, as an architect, and we are dealing with architecture and urban planning, I experience every day the attitude to have this approach where you zoom out and zoom in. So the ability of the training of try to look the things from a distance and then go very deeply in the detail. Sometimes it leads you to a quite confused thinking, but it helps. It's like the way we learn every day by using our iPhone and zooming out and zooming in. So for these things, I'm trying always to look the issues with the main word of the context. For me, the context is very important. Context means the ability of look around and know exactly where you are. So I'm trying to recall the discussion in a way and try to get oriented in this image of a global city or of a city that has to be compete with other cities. And in this way, I'm a little bit confused. And to find my context, I try to go back to my city, which is Milan, which in a way is very similar to St. Petersburg. I'm sorry if I skip a little bit your answer, but I'm trying to to find the pictures in this way. St. Petersburg is a 5 million city, which is actually a lot. I came many times to St. Petersburg. I never realized it's such a big city. The center is quite quiet during the day. You just notice that at 5 o'clock when it's the rush hour, because there's a lot of cars, you don't know where they come from actually before. And Milan, it's also quite a big city, even if technically it's a 1.5 million city, the city, but the let's say the global Milan, the big Milan, it's more than 5 million city people, so very easy to compare. There are many others similarity of Milan. Milan, it's a second city of Italy. His competition is with Rome, a similar size city. St. Petersburg has this big competition with, ideally with Moscow, but Moscow is a giga city. It's more than 12 million city, and so the comparison is very difficult. But the issue is on the developing of St. Petersburg is what does really a city wants to be when it's grown. It's like what you say to children. What do you want to be when you're grown? What St. Petersburg wants to become? I think it's an issue of identity. We have to find, you have to find very clearly for the city an idea of identity. I very agree with what Shaska said. There is not an issue to compete with other cities. And this is the process, actually, the process of the identity, what Milan is trying to follow now. Milan had a similar situation like St. Petersburg was until the 70s, 80s, a big industrial city. The industrial area were closed, so it became in these days a financial city. Many companies established their headquarters in Milan, and it's really the financial center of Italy. I'm very much skeptical about these issues that Gazprom is now coming to St. Petersburg, and other big companies are coming to St. Petersburg, because the question is, are they just bringing the headquarters here, the main quarter, and the business stays in Moscow, or really it's the perspective is to create St. Petersburg as a center, as a new motor, as a new center of some of the Russian economy. The other issues is the reuse of the industrial areas, which was, for example, a topic of Milan. In the beginning of the 90s, many of the big areas in Milan, industrial area, closed, and they will make many mistakes by reusing the industrial areas. I think Milan is, from this point of view, a good example, because the industrial areas were very close to the center in a way, because Milan is also, for its structure, a polycentric city, which is the thing that I heard here. It's one of the scope for St. Petersburg to become a polycentric city. I really believe in polycentric city, but the problem of Milan that still, despite is a polycentric city because of his developing, Milan is the union of different small cities. There are not connection between the single centers. There are not strong relations between the single centers. So it's very difficult to speak about polycentric city when the different centers don't talk each other, don't have a relation between each other, unless one of the issues is to create identities, to create different identities also within a city, to be able to give to the places public spaces. I'm saying simple things, a mix of use, simple things. At the end, what we are trying to have in a city is very simple things: to live well and to have a good life. I know it's quite banal to say that, but for me, as a planner, this is a very simple goal. It's not to create global cities and again to compete with our neighbors. It's just to create a good place to live. So the issues of identity, of a good architecture, and good architecture can create identity, of a good planning can create identity, a good business can create identity. I was impressed by Michael when he said that business is looking always for a good partner. And that's what didn't happen in Italy and also in Milan, where the business was looking primarily for good business and speculation, and came to bad urban planning, bad architecture, and now we are trying to find again our public spaces, which are the places where we live and we stay there all life. So this is quite an important thing, and so simply that was my issues. And actually I remember a very nice Russian movie on that. I don't remember the title, but you all know it probably. It's a movie about the 60s or the 70s, where a guy gets drunk in a banya and find himself on a plane going from Moscow to St. Petersburg. What's the title? Anyway, and he wake up in a taxi and went to his home, and his home had exactly the same address from Moscow. The building looked exactly the same. He lived on the same floor, and the plan of the apartment was exactly the same.
Same lock and key.
And the same lock and key. Yes, you should see it. Saskia, it's a fantastic movie. What's the name of the movie? Shliach Lipak. Yes. And well, also it's a very romantic movie because he found a girl living in this apartment. So and everything very good and well. And I found it a fantastic, ironic vision about the city, not only about the Soviet city, because we build in our, let's say, Dubai dream, sometimes cities like this, where you don't find yourself, where you don't have the identity, you get lost, you go back in the evening in your dormitory area, and hardly you can find your building again. So just to conclude, I think this is one issue that in this discussion, which was very interesting, I thought I wanted just to add. And meanwhile, I forgot your question. So.
Okay, thank you, Francesco, and thank you for your knowledge of Russian movie. Коллеги, у нас время нашей сессии приближается.
Fortunately, the time of our session is coming to an end, and I didn't have an opportunity to give the floor to our panelists. I hope we'll have time during the next panels. Now, I would like to see the results of a questionnaire in terms of today's meeting. You see the question whether St. Petersburg will be able to become a global city in the course of the next decade, or it is not worthwhile worthwhile to set up such a goal. This is the opinion of the residents of the city. Look how it goes. I will provide comments. Everything depends with Europe. If the trade and economic relations will be strengthening, then yes, such a goal is possible. And then you may have a look for yourselves. Probably I won't comment any further. And with that, I want to thank all the panelists. Hope you received enough information and satisfaction from this session. Thank you. Our conference is going on, but now we have a break.